I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Brian Wilson.
And joining us now on the line is our friend Lisa Boothe, who is a GOP conservative strategist, to talk about what's going on with the GOP side of the equation as we head into the Iowa. How are you? Heading into the Iowa caucuses. It's next Monday. By the way, I'll be there to provide coverage of the caucus for WMAL listeners. So listen, as I look at it right now, it looks like the polls show Trump pulling ahead, but I think the real question has always been who has the better ground game there in Iowa, because it's the ground game that gets people to actually turn out. You might do well in the surveys, but really it matters whether or not you can get your people to show up. So who has the better ground game there in Iowa between Cruz and Trump?
Well, and you're right, and that's always been the biggest question mark about Donald Trump is the fact that, there seems to be an enthusiasm level there, but the reality is if you look at polling, a lot of the caucus goers that said that they'll support Donald Trump, this might be their first time caucusing, which is a difficult thing. So I think that's always been the biggest question mark about Donald Trump. Can he turn people out? Can he turn people out to caucus in Iowa? Can he turn people out in New Hampshire? And we'll see. History has shown that Iowa caucus goers tend to make decisions sort of at the last minute, kind of heading into caucus. And so, we'll have to see. And I mean, the biggest name of the game, particularly in Iowa, is actually, the evangelical Christians. They make up about 60% of caucus goers. And if you look at 2008, when Governor Mike Huckabee won, and then again in 2012 when former Senator Rick Santorum won, they were able to win about double digits with evangelical Christians. So I think that's going to be, the biggest key here. And, if you look at someone like Ted Cruz, there's been article after article of him focusing specifically on the evangelical Christians. There's a reason that he launched at the Liberty University, and he's made a concerted effort to go after evangelical Christians.
Lisa Boothe is our guest. By the way, I'm proud to say she's president of High Noon Strategies, her own little strategic consulting firm that she's just hung a shingle out there for. Congratulations on that, Lisa.
Thank you so much.
Listen, you live in the world of polls and figuring out what's inside the polls, right? Is it Byron York had a fascinating article from New Hampshire over the weekend where they had that big Republican get-together where all the Republican people that he spoke with, none of them could say that they actually knew anyone firsthand who supported Trump. And it was a remarkable article. And I wonder, could the polls either be overestimating Trump's appeal because he's such a recognizable name that his name gets responded to very quickly? Or, on the other hand, are the polls underestimating his appeal because the people who might vote for him are actually kind of under the radar and haven't been involved?
Well, and that's to be seen. And look, Byron York is a phenomenal writer and is an incredible journalist. So, I have no doubt that he absolutely did his homework and sort of researching the article. And then that's an interesting point. I think it's one of those things that either of those scenarios could potentially be in play here.
See, that's what I thought, which kind of means we really don't know what's going to happen next week, do we?
Well, and that's tough. And I mean, look, polls are a snapshot in time. And so you're able to learn a decent amount heading into, the Iowa caucuses or New Hampshire, but there's a variety of things that could take place between now and then. And, the reality is that if, Donald Trump does well in Iowa, then that could potentially head him into New Hampshire with, some strong momentum. And we've seen poll after poll that Donald Trump is actually, has been leading the charge in New Hampshire, has done quite well there, and has, held and maintained a steady lead. So, but that has been the biggest knock against Trump, and the biggest question mark about Trump is a lot of the individuals who have said, at least in polling, that they would support Donald Trump. This could potentially be a first time that they're voting, or it's been a while since they voted. So the big question is he going to be able to turn these guys out? And that's the question, because there's been a lot of articles sort of hitting him on the lack of ground game, which is, sort of inside baseball, but it is important because if you've got supporters, it's one thing to have people saying that you're going to support someone. It's another thing to actually get them out to caucus in the instance of Iowa, or to get out to vote in the instance of New Hampshire.
Let me ask you this, though, about Marco Rubio, because he started showing up around the state being accompanied by Senator Joni Ernst, the junior senator from the state of Iowa. And that's a pretty hefty endorsement to have somebody like Ernst in your corner. I guess he's making the case that, look, these guys, they're fighting it out. A pox on both their houses. Why don't you consider Rubio? Is there a possibility that Rubio could surge late in this race?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you look at Rick Santorum, he was actually behind heading into the Iowa caucuses and was able to win. And so, I mean, that very well could be the case. And particularly if you look at Iowa, we know that history has shown that people make up their minds, in a short period of time prior to the Iowa caucuses. So, I mean, that could be the case. And I think with Marco Rubio, he doesn't necessarily need to win Iowa. But he does need a place in the top three, which I think is very reasonable and plausible for him to do so. And then he needs to have a strong showing in New Hampshire and South Carolina. So I think this has just been such an incredibly fluid primary race and primary election cycle that at this point you really can't rule anyone out, in my opinion. Now we're beginning the nominating process. Now is the time that matters. I mean, there's 2,470 delegates to the Republican convention, and a candidate needs to win 1,236 of those delegates to actually win the nomination. If you look at it, Iowa, for instance, it only makes up really about 1% of the delegates needed to win the nomination. So it's not really significant in the sense of the amount of delegates that are going to be awarded because they're awarded proportionally, but. What it does do is it gives you momentum, and especially if you look at such a crowded primary field, these really early states are important in sort of winnowing out the field because I believe that the field is going to change pretty drastically just in these next few weeks here.
Hey, Lisa Boothe, we only have 30 seconds, but I'm going to ask you the same question we want to ask our listeners at this time, which is the Fox News debate coming up this Thursday. Donald Trump threatening to boycott it, not show up because of Megyn Kelly's involvement. Is that a smart play? Is that a smart move? It'll certainly get his name in the newspapers, but I don't know. I think you want to be a part of that debate, don't you?
I agree with you. I think he needs to be a part of the debate. I mean, look, they all signed up to do this. You signed up to run to be the Republican nominee, and you're running for commander-in-chief. So, in my opinion, you got to kind of suck it up and put your big boy pants on. And, if you can't take on Megyn Kelly, how can you handle Putin? So, I think he should go to the debate like every other candidate and make his case to the American people, make his case to Republican voters as to why he deserves to be our nominee.
All right. Well, Lisa Boothe, we'll leave it right there. Great stuff. Always a pleasure to have you.